Hello, everyone. Welcome and happy Valentine's Day. I am here with the fabulous Marc Gregory. He is going to be talking about a couple of his books. I'm going to put the first one we're going to talk about in the comments of alternative energy. And Marc, if you wanted to share with us where you are coming in from, and then talk a little bit about your first book that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, good morning. Happy Valentine's Day and happy early morning here out in Alberta, Canada. So coming to you, at 6:30 a.m. out west. And thank you very much for including me on this. When I saw the post there on Facebook about you looking for romance writers for your Valentine's Day special, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on here. I get a lot of credit in my writing for being a male author that can write very passionate love stories, and all of my books have love stories in them. And I think Alternative Energy is the first book that I wrote. Did very well, so I ended up writing a sequel to it, and there will be another one coming up eventually. So I have 4 books in total. I have Alternative Energy 1 and 2. I have Price Per Barrel, and I have Quantum Invidia. Quantum Invidia is more of my middle grade young adult book, and it's going to be a series eventually also. So all of my stories have all of my books have love stories in them, some more than one. I'm an author that really likes to write for passion and emotion. I really like to bring I like my readers to feel when they read my work. So a lot of my works, a lot of the stories are very personal to me. Unlike Alternative Energy is written in the first person, and I did that somewhat purposely because it reads more like an autobiography, and so I find that approach is easy to get. Well, it makes it a little bit easier to get real reactions from the reader and the audience, and I do spend the time, enough time for the readers to really connect with the characters enough so that they do become emotionally involved in the story. The emotions and the passion and some of the relationships in my stories are a lot of it comes from real life experience. I've lived, we'll say, not a sheltered life by any means. I've done a lot of traveling. I've had a lot of adventures, and I've had a lot of relationships in my life. All experiences are good experiences. But so a lot of the feelings and stuff that come through in my writing are, the situations and whatnot are not accurate, but the emotions and stuff that I feel, I always try to relate to something in my personal life. So in Alternative Energy, the first one, Alternative Energy is a coming of age story. It starts out somewhere very close to home for me, which is in Alberta. And Alberta, for people who don't know, is a very, they call it the Texas of Canada. So it's a very oil-rich province. And that's big at that's a big driving industry up here. So it starts out with a young man in his 20s. And it's told from that perspective. So everybody has to remember that it's basically narrated by a 20-year-old boy. So the language, the scenes, they're all accurate, right? So expect that when you go into the story. When I wrote Alternative Energy, a lot of people refer to my Facebook posts. I've done a lot, like a big promotional month on my Alternative Energy series. So it explains a lot about the making of this book and how it came to be. I wanted Alternative Energy to really, like, when I write a book, I really look for what I like to see in a book, and that's passion, emotion. I like stories that move me. I'm more of a movie buff, to be honest, but movies got to be created through writing. So I wanted it to be a full transformation of my character from someone who was very naive to the world, who sets out there. He's taking, just out of school, and he's taking very big steps, and he's invited into this career path that, a lot of people in the area strive to hope for an invitation into it. And he gets there and he feels that this is going to be his dream job. And it starts out, in Canada in a very, we'll say, a very dark setting overall. Like it's kind of bright in the start, and life is ho hum, and then it picks up, but it goes into a very dark place, and then he comes back out, and he ends up traveling through people that he meets and events that happen. There's a very intense love story involved there, and then uh, as love does, it doesn't always go the way that you hope. So he ends up traveling. There's devastation, there's tragedies in the story, and then he ends up traveling. So, and finding new love, finding just a new perspective on life completely. And he meets a bunch of new people, travels to a foreign island, and takes up new interests, and meets new people, and gets a new perspective on life, and finds love again. And that's where that story kind of ends off. But I like that alternative energy, that series in total, like even the second book, but we'll get into that in a second. But it's a total transformation of the character. It's a total transformation of the feeling in the book. And you just feel like you've been kind of drugged through the ringer a little bit, as the character has been. And when you come out, you're in this new area, this new, the sun has come out, it's lifted the dark, you're out of the cold, and life is new.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize that your first love may not be your only love. I really want to insert in here your Facebook page, which you mentioned. So if you are digging Marc, you feel like, oh my gosh, I've got to follow this guy, I definitely encourage you to do that. I've put all 3 of the books that he has mentioned, and I need to put his 4th book in here for a minute, or I might save that because I am doing YA and children's books in May. So definitely I want to invite you back for the show for that, because that is going to be an awesome time. So we're prepping up for summer reading lists. I think that's a great time for that. I want to take a minute and just thank everybody who are out there now listening, or listening in the future. And it just say that the way that I am able to promote this show and do this show is through donations and through product sales. I'm putting those links in here. And the authors, unlike a lot of other people, what I will say is authors are constantly getting scammed, and I have to try to convince them, really, the only thing I want is your time, your network, for you to share my work, for me to share your work. And the way that I can pay for the studios and the streaming services and everything is just if people are kind enough to donate. So love having you on the show. I want to take a minute, Brandon, and read an excerpt. I love that you shared some excerpts with me. And I'm going to start with passage 1. And the reason why I ended up on passage 1 from Alternative Energy is because I'm not going to give any spoilers. You talked about the journey. I went through the kind of things. I think, what, I'm just going to stick with the beginning. It's something that readers are going to read pretty early on in the book, so it's not going to give any real spoilers. So here we go. The flickering of shadows awed my sense of vision, and the sliding of her hand with the pulse of the music excited my sense of touch. As she grew more aroused, her scent pushed through the saturated air to my nose, instinctively powerful, and informed me of her desire, committing my attention like blood to a shark. The hallucinogen had erased my trace of evolved being, leaving only primal need. I grabbed and forced her to the blanket. So I'm going to stop there. What I am going to say is this book is spicy, ladies and gentlemen, as well. But I know that my sister said that she and her book group are definitely going to be checking this out later. And she wanted me to put, quote, a smut flag on it. So ladies, you are certainly going to get your fill, to my sister and all her girlfriends. And so I wanted to just say one of the things I love about your writing is just so much sensory detail. How do you think of this? How do you get this across? What is your writing style for those who are like, oh my gosh, how did he even come up with this?
Well, like I said, I haven't lived exactly a sheltered life. I do have a lot of experience in relationships and whatnot, but my writing style is really I really have to be inside the stories when I write them, which makes it, challenging at times to write, because you really have to isolate yourself from people. There's a lot of walking alone and just trying to stay in that scene, that story, to try and get it through there. But you really have to you have to smell, you have to feel everything. You have to try to relate that to some type of life experience. I think that's the only way that you can write like that. And it's interesting to hear you say the two words. I recently had a conversation with a woman that read Alternative Energy, actually, and she came out. She says, "Wow, honestly, like, I don't think you ever have to question that you're reading something from a male author, but she goes to your ability to write passion and love. Like it's very odd. I think people find it very odd for a male writer to be able to do that, or even to want to write something like that. But like I said, I write for emotion. But I said, so I asked her, I said, so is my work smut? And I said, is because I don't mind. I don't mind, right? There's a market. There's a market for smut. So I'm like, is it smut? And she said, no. She goes, it's, and she had to think about it for a second. But she said, it's spice. And I'm like, well, what's the difference? I don't know what the difference is. And she said, the passion and the sex scenes and everything, the love, and the feeling, the emotion are all there. She goes, but you have a true story in every one of your in every one of your books. There's an honest story there with morale. Like you want your reader to. It's not just smut. There's an honest story behind everything. So she felt that was the difference between smut and what she described my books as spice. And that's what I want, right? Like we can have smut, and I've watched it and I've read it, and it's good, and a lot of people enjoy it. But I do always try to bring a personal, like a story. Like I do want engagement from people to come out the other end of my books and say, it was worth reading. Like, wow, like we had a story here. Like, so with alternative energy, like I say, it just comes through. It takes you through so many different scenes. Like there's tragedy with friends, and everything happens very fast. At the beginning, they take the time to build into that character so people can really follow it. And at the end of Alternative Energy 1, I wrote the book and I kind of left it open a little bit at the end, because I'm like, well, it was my first book. I didn't know how things were going to go. It was my dipping my toe into this industry, and so I left it open a little bit. So if it did well, I could write a sequel for it, and it did well. So I did end up writing a sequel for it, but I had a really tough time at that point. So Alternative Energy 2 wasn't actually my second book that I wrote. Price Per Barrel was actually my second book. Just so everybody knows, like I'll probably mention my editors a few times, because I do work with editors. That's my main focus when I'm writing a book. Is I have a very one-on-one personal connection with my editors, and I love them to death, and I just love that creative process, working with somebody else and just having them there for their opinions and their help, and to tell you, when things are lagging and whatnot. But so Price Per Barrel is my second book that I wrote, and I just wrote it. I was trying to figure out alternative energy because I didn't want to leave this character. I wanted that book, that whole path of that whole series, to keep following the original template. Let's take them from one point, and then let's have the book end totally somewhere totally different feeling. I want the character to evolve to a next stage in life, and just drag him through the next adventure and beat him up, and then spit him out the other side, right? And so it took me a while to figure out how to do that. But in between it, so I had this idea for Price Per Barrel that was rolling around. And Price Per Barrel is, okay, so Price Per Barrel, and people say, well, it's oil related, and I thought, yeah. And again, if you read my Facebook page, you'll see some of my process, and I want to know, before I even write a story, is it going to appeal to a wide demographic? Is the story going to be for all sorts of readers, and it's going to bring a little bit of something in there for everybody? And has it got appeal? With even the title and stuff like that. So when I came up with Price Per Barrel, I'm like, well, it's an oil book. I don't know if I want an oil book. But I'm like, how do I sell this to a broad audience, right? But I kind of took it on as a challenge to, can you make something that's basically based on an oil industry, but can you make it sexy? And I did it. I did. If you talk to my editor, she'll say, Price Per Barrel, she feels is my best work, and it's a page turner, like right out of the bat. It's the flip pages. That's what it's there for, and I do it well. And there's tons of spice in there. And she said it reminds her of, for whatever reason, the TV series Dynasty, for anybody who can remember that. But there's power, sex, love, tragedy again, and so while I was writing, and that's based on like, so it does take place up. I don't know if anybody of your listeners have heard of like the oil sands up in Alberta, very controversial uh, stuff. And I've spent time up in the city of Fort McMurray, where they're based out of. And so a lot of that book is based on, yeah, the power and stuff that comes with the industry, but also like local legends of, secret societies and stuff that happen up there. So, and some of the indigenous relations that happen up there, good or bad. So it's a fun book. It's a fun book, and like I say, it's a page turner, and there's everything. If you're looking for passion and whatnot, it's in there. Like you won't have any problem finding that. There's multiple relationships in there. Some are seductive, and some are more real. And don't ever think that everything's going to turn out for the better. Like I write life stories, so, and we all know how that goes.
Yeah, that was a lot, and I want to pull back a few of those things. But the other thing I want to do is give a shout out to my sister-in-law. I'm going to flag this one. I'll be like, you have to watch this one. She's out there. She lives in Edmonton, so she could definitely relate. I want to share my own books for anybody who is interested. These are available for Kindle download, absolutely free today. So if you want, check them out, take a look at them, and it was funny when you were describing like looking for the perfect word for something. For decoding history, I was like, oh, the invisible thread, the translucent thread, da 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 da. And I then found out there was a specific meaning to the term invisible thread as I pulled through it. So I went with the term invisible, but just going through those like kind of nuances, translucent versus invisible, right? And I love your language. Do you spend a lot of time searching for that kind of perfect word and how to share it, or is this just sort of a natural gift that you have?
I'll say, in this, I've had this conversation many times, and we all have our processes of writing, and we all have our backgrounds, and we all have our vocabularies, and my daily life is working in corporate also, and so my writing comes. The vocabulary is very, especially talking from a character's perspective. When the characters are talking, the words are accurate with the storyline and the people, the characters in it. I'm very careful with my wording in the way that, there's some things that people will find consistent in my books. I try to keep them consistent. And the things that I've read and that I've appreciated in books, and one thing, I'll try to keep my chapters short. I'm used to reading in bed, and I almost fall asleep instantly, so I don't like to wait for another 30 pages before I can close the book and start off at a different chapter before I can find the next chapter. My vocabulary is, I do search for the right words. Sometimes I do rely somewhat on my editor to help me out with vocabulary. Sometimes they'll put a more colorful word, and sometimes it would do it. But I like to stay true to my voice also. Like, if something really sticks out in my writing, that someone was suggested, a word that was suggested by someone, I really have to go through it, and does that fit? Is that something that this character would say, or does that fit in this book? I really don't like to write, and even when I give speeches or at work, I don't like to write. I don't like to speak over anybody's head. I don't want my readers to have to put down the book and look up a word. And I get caught up in some writings, like whether it's an editorial or whatever in the news, where to me it seems like writers are really trying to exercise their vocabulary to a point where, when you string too many descriptive words together that are kind of, I'll call them gray terms, it can really disrupt the flow of the read. I really like when I say that I want to write to a book that appeals to a vast demographic. That's what I'm writing for. I'm writing for the general public. I'm not writing to, get my English PhD or anything like that. I'm writing to a story that everybody can sit down. Because I want everybody to be able to go home, open up my book, continue reading, and just have the book flow, the story flow. I don't want any disruptions in to, I guess, vocabulary that kind of the average person has to put it down and say, well, what exactly does he mean there? I mean, you can put a lot of words in and they'll fit just based on context, and people can get through them just based on the context. But when you try to string too many together, to me, it's almost disruptive for myself anyways, right? So I think that lends a lot to my voice. And I've been told by my editors that I do have a very original voice. I appreciate finding the editors that I have that recognize my original voice and don't try to edit it out, which is a very big deal for anybody who's maybe writing there for the first time. Do your research into your editor, get to know them a little bit, and see, get them maybe some samples that you can work through, and make sure that they recognize your voice and that they do what they can to preserve that. Because I did have one bad experience earlier on with a editor that I didn't have direct communication with there through a publishing house or whatever, and it was not. I need one-on-one connection with my editors.
Yeah, that's the important thing is know your writing process. I've had the same small publishing house that I use my entire time, and we've developed, like you said, that relationship, which I think is super important, because I don't know that I would want to switch. I am putting my books out there for anybody who is interested. They are available for free Kindle download today, which is Valentine's Day, February 14th, as well as available tomorrow on February 15th, in case you're listening to this later on. And just one of the things I want to point out for readers, the number one thing you can do for any reader for Valentine's Day or anytime, the gift that we want that speaks to our heart is reviews. Reviews on Amazon and Goodreads is really what helps the algorithms to pick up the books. So if you like my books, if you like Marc's books, any books you like, the best thing you can do, show how much you love an author by leading a reviews. Marc, I cannot believe how quickly this time has gone by. The one thing I wanted to ask you about that we haven't gotten to yet is you've mentioned a lot about your writing, and then we just started talking in the editing. So I wanted to go into that a little bit deeper for the audience. Is what has surprised you as an international author on sharing your work, marketing your work, and being able to kind of reach out to the global audience?
Well, that's been my biggest struggle. Now, I've worked with publicists who have enjoyed my work, and I've had some interviews with mainstream media and whatnot. But my biggest struggle with reaching out to a global audience, as far as promotion and media goes, is I very much struggle with social media. So, again, if anybody refers to my Facebook page, they'll see that this is the year when I'm trying to really put my best foot forward in social media and trying to get out there and trying to get things moving. My books do sell. I don't know really how they're selling. They're selling internationally. They're selling in Europe, the US, Canada, the UK regularly. So I think if I can give it a little bit more push through social media, hopefully we can get things rolling a bit more. Facebook's my platform that I'm starting out on. I really don't know Instagram, how to do it that well yet. I'm planning on working on that, but I think Facebook's going pretty good this year. I do like Facebook because it's more of a writing platform, right? So when I'm a writer and I have my voice, and I think Facebook lets me portray that voice to my audience more, and they can get an idea of who I am and how I write. And so that's why I'm enjoying Facebook right now. I'll try to look at Instagram in the future and see how you make a post on there. But I think for the time being, anybody on Facebook, if they want to reach out, follow me. Absolutely, appreciate it.
Yeah, and this gets live streamed out to 2 different Facebook feeds, as well as to YouTube, and then clips will go out on those. So love to have our audience and people giving this feedback to us. Really appreciate it. We are going to have to wrap up. Marc, any last comments you want for the audience before we end this session?
No. Thank you to everybody for joining me, and I hope I enjoyed the interview. I hope it went pretty well. I actually would have liked a little bit more time, but happy Valentine's Day to everybody, and maybe we can do another one sometime, Amy, and I appreciate
Definitely. Our May 16th is when we are going to be doing our YA, and I would love to have you come back and discuss your YA book. Thanks,
Sounds great.
everyone. See you in just a minute with Caroline.